Hi, welcome to the first edition of a video series I'm hoping to create that is essentially me showing you how I create the comic that I draw online called This Is Pi Day. I've been drawing this comic for about 6 months. Nothing particularly special about it that anyone else probably couldn't do. I'm just an average guy. I've been messing around with art since I was young, and I decided to start drawing a comic about basically fatherhood, which I've been doing for about 10 years. I use a tool called Inkscape, and it is a open source, free, downloadable tool that does vector graphics. And I've been using this to do various things for probably 10 years now. I kind of got my start doing icons and other sorts of vector graphics kind of on the side to kind of support my web development work that I do. And so I wouldn't say I'm an expert with this, but I've got quite a bit of experience doing basic design work with this. So today I have put together a script for what will be, I assume, my This Is Pi Day number 27, probably to come out in early November of 2017 and published on my website, piday.ca, piday.ca, and hopefully by the time this video comes out you'll be able to have a look at that. So essentially what I do is I've gone over the last 6 months and put together a library of character models and frame models, and I add to it and I reuse numerous things. I'm not drawing these from scratch every time. I mean, I am a dad working full-time, and I have a variety of hobbies, and this is just one of them. And so what I tend to do is only add to my art when necessary. So what I'm going to be doing today is putting together a comic that's, I thought, appropriate about how my girl character, who's the daughter, who I usually refer to as the girl, is she wants to get on YouTube. And so she goes to her dad for a little bit of advice, and she goes through the various things you might expect from a 10-year-old who watches a lot of YouTube and thinks she wants to be on it. And there's going to be 4 comics about this, but the one that sort of ends it all at the very end of the week of should I be on YouTube. So there's a Tuesday, a Wednesday, and a Thursday comic, which I will be doing in black and white. They're 3-panel strips. And then there's a Saturday comic, which will end it all, and that's sort of the wrap-up of her adventures on YouTube, and coming to the realization that that being on YouTube isn't quite as simple as she thought. So I won't spoil it too much, other than if you're watching this video, I assume you've seen the comic, and if you haven't, check it out. And yeah, so let's get started. As you can see, I've been playing around here. I put one of my basic frames on here, so I've drawn these frames out. Excuse me. I usually use the same frame over and over again, and I might just twist it around a little bit, and I tend to try and reuse those frames so that I get a consistent look. Early days, I went and I drew a a frame set that was a little bit more open, a little less standard square, but I tend to find some of my best views come from Instagram. And of course, if you're familiar with Instagram, you're probably also familiar with the fact that Instagram tends to work best with square photos. So what I end up finding is that on Instagram, if I don't use square photos, then it's really quite difficult to post them and get kind of a good framing of those pictures. So I came up with this model a while back, which is basically just kind of a wobbly little square, and they've worked pretty well because I can crop it sort of around each frame and do a side swipe, and then still post it on the website, and you get a nice cohesive comic that makes sense. It flows linearly from frame 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I can still post as individual frames, and yeah. So as I said, I tend to use the same models over and over again. So as you can see, I just pulled some from my library. I have a nice big library of different character models. Every time I make a new model, sometimes I'll just sit down and draw new models, and maybe some of them haven't shown up. Like these are the winter ones down here. It's not winter yet, but winter's coming where I live. Soon enough, I'm going to have to build some comics that have to do with the winter, because the stories are going to have to revolve around being outside. That's the type of thing. So, as I said, we're doing one that's about YouTube. So we've got a character who is basically on the computer, and what I've got is I've got some of these models that I want to sort of recombine into a different sort of look. So I've got my basic girl character standing here, not doing much. That's sort of the basic one. And I've got the dad character who's sitting at a cafe table, and then I've got the daughter girl character working on the computer at the table, or at a kind of a bar stool kind of look, which, if you were to come to my house, you would know that this is how our kitchen is set up. So this is quite familiar. We've got a little bar table with a stool, and that's where we tend to pull the computer out and do some work there. And so this is familiar to us. Now these things, as you can tell, are made up of probably very similar little pieces. Like you can see the computer here is the same. The character models are basically the same. I just sort of tend to build on them. And so what I'm going to do today is I want to kind of take the dad from this one and put him at the counter. So I need to figure out how I'm going to do that. And you can tell he doesn't quite line up, because if I sit him there, his feet are going to dangle down. So I'm going to have to figure out how to do that. So the first thing I'm going to do is break this apart. I just got these grouped together into bits. And I've got bits and pieces here. I'm just going to duplicate that, pull it over. We've got this nice little bits and pieces here. I'm going to get rid of as much of the girl as I can out of this picture. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I've got a bit of a style I've been working on, and if you follow along, you can tell that I'm not going for perfect look. I'm trying to make it look hand-drawn, and there is a deliberate look and feel to what I'm doing here. I do a little bit of color bleed. I do a little bit of line bleed. And see this computer, it isn't a perfect shape. There's a little bit of leakage of the color out the side. That is very deliberate. And so when I do that, I tend to try and figure out exactly what I want it to look like, and get a good sense of how I can rough it up a little bit, just to give it that kind of look. Let's see. I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to haul it down to the bottom here. Working with this is essentially a matter of piecing together lots and lots of little pieces. And sometimes that involves grouping things together and then trying to sort out where all the little layers and everything kind of fits together. As you can see, I've still got her feet in that. I'm just going to pull down some of these things. Get rid of the stuff that I know I definitely don't need, and then try and reshape the other stuff. And it is, I was about to say it's art, because it is art. It's trying to get a sense of what things are and how they fit together and where things should overlap, and using the minimum amount of pieces that you can to sort of give a sense of what something is in your picture. And sometimes you end up messing things up. So right now I've got this and it looks kind of goofy of him hanging there, so I'm just going to get rid of his shoes because he's probably not going to be wearing his shoes in the house. Here in Canada, I know in the States, some of our friends in the States wear their shoes in the house. That's usually a no-go thing in Canada. I also don't need a coffee cup there. In Canada, well, I'm speaking for myself. Our house, you take off your shoes at the door, so you walk around in sock feet. It probably comes from the fact that 6 months of the year, your shoes would be covered in snow and mud, and so you probably don't want to be walking around in that. So I've got this, and I've grouped these things together. I'm just trying to still get rid of the pieces that I don't want and give it a sense of a rough outline of what I'm doing with this. I don't think his legs would be spread apart that much either. So I've got him sort of dangling there, and I'm trying to get a sense of how I can make him look like he's sitting properly at this table. So right now I'm not entirely impressed with that look, but get a little bit bigger on that shadow. That's a little crooked. What I try to do, and again, I've made a stylistic choice here, is really to frame things up so that there's a consistent front-facing view. And as I build more character models, maybe I'll stray a little bit more from this. But some of it's laziness, and some of it really is that the whole point of building a comic is to tell a story. And if you're more worried about the art than the story, then you're not really going to tell a good story. And so I've chosen not to worry about my art as much and focus on the story bits more. So what I'm doing here is I try to draw a rough outline of things. And so what I've created is I've used this brush stroke tool is what I draw most of my work with. So if you say I'm not drawing, I am technically drawing. I'm drawing strokes, and I tend to do them over and over again. Everything usually I do a little bit of cleanup. I'm just going to simplify this line a little bit, and I try and do everything in a 6-weight of border outline. So I draw a line, the line is super thin, and then I stroke it with a 6-pixel width, and that gives me that look. So as you can see, kind of got a consistent look. This is the line I just drew, which isn't much. It's the base of the chair. And yeah, so we're getting close to having this dad character sitting in a chair, and you can tell there's some extra little bits here and there. Still got the table in the background there. I don't like that. Pull those pieces out. Oops. And this is one of the pitfalls of this program, is it is a little bit finicky if you're not used to it. It tries to outthink you most of the time, and trying to figure out where things are and what layer they're in and select the thing. And sometimes you've got things that are transparent that are over top of things that aren't transparent, and then you're trying to sort of get a sense of where everything should be and get rid of all these extra lines that don't need to be there, and you click them and sometimes they're attached to another thing. It can be a little finicky sometimes just to kind of fudge it and adjust it. So I've got his feet hanging there, and what I think I'm going to do is kind of wrap one underneath. So how I had the girl sitting up here, I like that look because that tends to be how you sit in a chair when you're doing this. I think his foot would be more dangling down, so I'm just going to rough in his foot here, just kind of how it might sit. Yeah, it's not big enough, so we'll make it a little bigger. And then I'm just going to get rid of this whole leg, because I don't think I'll be using that leg there. So we'll just delete some of that. But here's what we got. Let's take back this. Get rid of that point there. What I'm doing is moving the vector points on this thing. Looks like I got a duplicate layer there. So pull back the vectors on this. So these are the points that frame up this vector, and you see I can shift the block around. What I really want to do is create this illusion that his leg is floating underneath. So I'm just going to wrap it up and around. Try and find an appropriate spot, grab that handle there, drag it down, the node, hide anything that isn't part of the foreground, and then just sort of nudge it around, maybe turn that into a different type of node. So the effect I'm going for is that he's got his leg draped under him. He's sitting sort of semi-cross-legged. Is that line I drew before. Obviously don't need that anymore. I don't need that one anymore. And yeah, so again, I want these things to join up at those seams that I've made already. I don't think his crotch would look quite like that. So let's see. Let's kill some of those nodes. Shrink this back down. Pull that up a little tighter. Give a little bulge to his leg. I think it might stick out that way. Again, his crotch is looking a little weird when you do that, so I gotta just kind of nudge it here and there. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull this foot as a sample. Oops. Duplicate that up. Twist it around. Let's do a little twist and turn. And then I'm gonna drop that to the foreground. And let's have a look back and see how this looks. So we're starting to get to the look of him with his leg tucked underneath. And honestly, I don't really like that. I think it would be falling down a little bit more, maybe resting on this thing here. So there's this crossbar here, which I think might be a little bit more natural place to set it. So just trying to get the curves right on this. And if I stop talking for a bit, it's because some of this does require a little bit of concentration. Let's draw some rough lines in. So, yeah, don't like that. The nice thing about drawing on the computer is that you can take numerous attempts to do it, and if you don't like it, you just undo it and you go back and try it again. I'm sure there's numerous tools you could to use to do this. I do like this Inkscape, first of all, because it's free. If you're a struggling artist and you don't want to put a lot of money into this, I mean, you could go buy Illustrator, which is essentially, that's what this is, Adobe Illustrator. But again, this one, if you can figure it out, it's a little less intuitive, but once you play around with it for a while, there's lots of great resources. It is a terrific tool for what it does. And yeah, free. Can't beat free. My daughter is even learning how to use it a little bit. So that is cool. Sometimes I do like to reference other artwork just to kind of get a sense of how somebody else might draw this. But today I'm just going to wing it. I don't want to start Googling stuff and make you sit through my Googling exercises. Just trying to get a little bit of a void going on in there. These node cusps are a little tricky, and this computer, depends how I have it set up. Sometimes I set it up a little differently, and it is a little bit more friendly, but however I was doing it last time, it had some jump twos in there, and it wants to kind of flick itself around and do its own thing. So we'll fight with that. Cusp node to cusp node, yeah, not too worried about that. So again, when you're doing this kind of stuff, it's a cartoon, so I mean, you're really trying to get a sense of what it is, and like I said, sometimes making the art a little bit more crude and just letting it up to people's imagination, like, you'll get the sense that it's that it's supposed to be what it is, and you know, it's really about trying to make it look sort of along the right lines. And of course, maybe you're better at art than me, probably better at art than me. I am not an artist. I am a web developer for whatever that's worth, and it is probably not worth very much. So yeah, so just trying to get a better sense. And I mean, if you do this kind of work enough, you sort of get an idea of what things might look like and how they should look. And I am really struggling with his leg right now, but you know, it'll come out. I sort of want to give it the look that it's not like he has a big hollow crotch or something, and I don't want to mess around with this too much. But what I'm hoping to do is try and create a believable gap there that sort of looks like a leg. So, you know, I work at different zoom levels. Whoa, not that. And then try and just sort of massage the image here and there. And to be honest, people aren't looking at that. Unless it's like really distracting, nobody's really paying attention to that. And at the end of the day, I could solve this in one very easy way, and that is not to show his below the waist. So maybe I'll do that. So I am just going to polish these off a little bit, and then we're going to frame this up, because I could probably end up spending an hour messing around with this, trying to get these just right. And that's not how I necessarily want to spend the better part of this video. So for this one, I'm doing a really basic look to it. So we're gonna put the father and daughter in there close, and yeah, let's do this. Object, group that up there, and I'm going to duplicate that. So frame one, we're going to have these two sitting there, and I'm going to make this a little bigger. So I'm locking the perspective on it, moving this up to pixels or percentage, because I'm more comfortable working in percentages right now. Maybe make that a 150. That zooms everything in there nicely, and we'll frame that down like that. Bring that layer to the top. Mask this one with a white layer below it. Bring that frame up to the top, and there we've got that video, that frame there. So in this one, in every frame actually, I have both characters talking. So I try and vary the mouths, and I also try and vary the eyes and make them look like they're doing different things in each video. So this might just be a very simple video, or a very simple comic of them having a conversation, maybe trading glances with each other. And what I might do is make a duplicate of this and get this in every frame. Oops, a little wild there. That didn't work. Oh, let's see. Duplicate. Try and line up those tabletops there. It's really jumpy today. We'll zoom in, that'll help. Sometimes things cooperate a little better than others. Now what I'm doing is I'm dropping these down pretty low because I want them to I want to leave a lot of space for text, because this one has quite a lot of text in it. So just frame up these things, get some masking going on here. I know it's not proper masking, but that's not good. A little finicky with my zoom button there. So what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to mask the background so that I can essentially have a white background on all my frames. I will add a final layer at the end, but until then I just want to make sure that every frame you're really only seeing the picture that I want you to see, and then I'll worry about the rest of it there. Now to zoom out, have a look at that. I'm just going to clean this up. Don't necessarily need to, but I'm going to. Get that text out of there. The trick with this also is to try and minimize the number of objects you're using. So I'm just going to kill these things here because those eat up memory, especially since I'm video recording. Might have a little bit of effect on my performance on how the video recording is affecting the everything else. So I'm going to mess around with some of the zooms on these things. I'm going to zoom these guys in a little bit more just to give it some visual interest. And that one will be zoomed in a little bit, which means I have to play around with the masking a little bit more. This guy, and just see how all these layers work with each other. Sometimes it gets a little complex, and maybe I'll do that with this one as well, except maybe not quite as much. I'll zoom that one into 120%. Just to kind of frame it up a little different. So now I'm just reevaluating that. I'm actually going to undo that because I'm looking at my text. I have my text in a Google document over here, and actually I have more text on frame 3 than I do on frame 4. So frame 4 has a little less text, so I'm going to make that one a little bigger. And I think we're going to stop here. I am back. I had to run off for about 20 minutes, but I am back. And while I was away, I had a little bit of a rethink on this, and I think I'm going to move these back into their original, well, not their original positions, but into an alternate position like that, just to frame it up a little differently for this particular one, just to give it a little bit more balance in that frame. So what I'm trying to accomplish here is essentially just to make it look like there is a little something different going on, and that just means rejigging things so that we can have this look like it is a little bit more balanced. That's all I'm going for. That's what I mean to say. I know I'm just muttering away here, but sometimes your brain is working and your hands are working, and moving your mouth at the same time doesn't quite work. I'm an artist, not a performers, so this is all new to me too. So anyways, so what I think I've accomplished there is I've got a little bit more balance in my frames. Yeah, I think I like that more. So I've got a large one because I've only got a little bit of text for the first frame, a lot more text for the second frame, a little bit of text on the third frame. I think I need some more room for that. The fourth frame has only got a little bit, but I still think we need a little bit more. I'm going to bring it right down. Maybe even hide that there. Now, all of those are, as you can tell, basically the same frame. But I'll go back to what I said earlier. This isn't about necessarily making this perfect art every time. It's more about telling a story. So, if you're a fan of the comic, you'll notice that a couple things are true. Mainly that I kind of have certain types of rules for how the girl and the dad talk. The girl is always in lowercase, and the dad is a properly punctuated, literate person, I guess. I don't know what you want to call it. And so what I've done is I've written up a script for this one, and I'm just gonna get it set up on the screen here. So basically they're having a conversation. How many views does our YouTube video have? 16. Oh, that's not very many. How do we make more people watch it? I told you to set your expectations. That doesn't make any sense. You can't make people watch. Yeah, anyways, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this into the thing, and usually this is when I rough it out, it doesn't always make sense, and so I try and build up the comic, then kind of massage how it all works. I'm just going to get my little web address down there, my watermark. There. Just fine-tuning. So you can see we're starting to get close to a finished comic. So the font that I tend to use for this is called MV Boley. It's not good. And I usually like to make it at an 80 point for these comics, which is usually enough. So let's start copying some of this text into here. Oops. Oops, there we go. So getting these text boxes to line up properly is sometimes a trick at the beginning. And then sorting it out. What I tend to do is I set it up in an old comic at one point. So I'm just going to open that up and find an old one that I can play with. Sorry about that. Let's see, I got my projects, Pi Day. So for example, I will open up my Pi Day number 24. This might take a second. There we go. As you can see, that's a long ago one. We'll just copy some text out of there, drop it in there. There we go. Now I know I've got the same text. I like to keep things consistent. I like to make sure that all these things look the same. You know, part of me wants to have this eventually sort of build it into maybe into like a book or something that I can put on somewhere more than just the web. And that may be a case of making sure they all look the same, they all have the same sort of feel to them. This is not weird. Okay, so I'm trying to copy some text out here. Copy. This does not usually happen. Having a bit of a technical issue. Alright, so I may be typing some of this stuff. So, let's see. There we go. So, let's line this up. So what I got here is essentially a flexible text box. And I'm just going to make sure it looks like they're saying these things. So, how many views does our YouTube video have? 16. And he's going to say that with all the sarcasm that you would expect from an indifferent dad. Because really, he is. Now, let's adjust their mouths here. So, she's okay, I think. But he is probably going to be looking at her a little bit. Or maybe he will be looking down at the screen. Yeah, let's make him look at the screen. I'm just going to massage the eyes. Move those eyes down. There, now he's looking at the screen. I'm just going to ungroup this a minute. This is where the risky part begins, because things that are not really in the right layers tend to twist around. And we'll draw him a new mouth. So I want him to have a interesting sort of mouth here. And I jumped that up to 150%. So I'm just going to clean this up a little bit. And we're going to make him talk. It's too big of a mouth. Yeah, it's about the right shape. Let's zoom in here so I can get a better look at this. I don't think that mouth text is big enough. Let's make that a 12. I think he'd almost be talking out of the side of his mouth there. And then we're going to add a little bit of white to the background. And we're going to drop that down behind there. As you can see, just going for that rough look about it. And then a really simple little line to denote who's talking. Simplify that a little bit, because as you can see there's lots of points on there. Make it nice and simple. It's a Control L. Same thing here, Control L it. Adjust that text. Now, there we go. First frame. I'm just going to save this a second, just to make sure. Always save your work. If you're used to messing around on all these fancy cloud-based stuff, you tend to have your work is always automatically saved, but this isn't one of those times. If it crashed, I think there's a recovery on there, but yeah, not quite the same. So she's like, oh, that's not very many. How do we make more people watch it? So that O is a little bit of a disappointment. So let's have a little bit of a pause there. Try and break up this text a little bit more. See, part of this is now massaging this text so it fits nicely in this space. You don't want it to bump up against any of the character models. You also don't want to make it so it's like a big stack of single words, because that looks kind of lame. And then I'm just going to emphasize some of this because, you know, there's some exaggeration in there. That's a little too big because he's not that excited. How do I make more people watch it? Oh, and then kind of a deflated sort of O by dropping the size of that one down. So you can kind of emphasize how text looks by messing around with the size of things. Add a little bit of emphasis to this one over here too while I'm at it. How many views does our YouTube video have? 16. Oh, that's not very many. How do we make more people watch it? And the dad says 16. No, just kidding. Grab some text from my off screen here. So as I said, the script doesn't entirely make a ton of sense because I typed it up while I was having coffee earlier. And so I told you to set your expectations. I told you to, what can I replace it with? Told you to, see, this is why I wrote stuff in advance, because on the fly, thinking this stuff up is sometimes where the art meets the confusion. I told you to can't make people watch stuff. Told you to level your expectations. Does that make any sense? Told you to lower your expectations. That's such a big word too. So the other part of this is that I'm really trying to write to an audience at my where you're not to get your hopes up. That seems more appropriate. I told you not to get your hopes up. You can't make people watch your stuff. Now the other thing I want to do here is, I'm just thinking, I want to give some visual interest to this. So I'm going to go back to my character models and let's see, open. By the way, I store all my stuff in this nice big online Dropbox. It means I can work on it on multiple computers, because I've got a couple computers that I work on this on. So everything is kind of stored in the cloud. And probably because I am running a video capture at the same time, it's going to chug away, and it's going to freeze up a couple times. Hopefully it doesn't affect the video. Well, what I want to kind of do is, I've got this white space here, so I almost want to just have him going, you know, holding up his hand in a, you know, you can't do everything, kind of use your brain. So I'm going to go back to my character model sheet, and just before I burn this out, I'm going to open this up, and so I've got a couple raised hands ones here, but I'm going to do this. So let's do this guy, copy him, bring him over here, And how much bigger is that? See, I zoomed that guy in there, so I need to zoom this guy in as well. So he is set at 700 high. So percentage, probably a 120 is what I had him at. Let's see, how does that line up? No, not quite. A little bigger than that. Still not big enough. I can't remember how big I zoomed this guy in. It seems pretty darn close. Now, I'm just going to ungroup this guy and I'm going to steal his arm. If you wonder how comics get made, this is the crude art of using everything. So let's grab his arm, haul that over. Here's all the bits and pieces. I do not need the rest of this piece here. Now, got this stray arm, and we're going to line that up. Let's tilt it a little bit. There we go. So now we've got this nice tilted little arm here. I'm going to zoom in and we're going to patch this up so that it all lines up nicely. Take this little shirt here. I'm going to have to ungroup this guy. There we go. Don't need that shirt there. So, now normally I would have liked to have built this before I put it into the frame, but sometimes as you're going along you realize that your frame, you have a little bit more room in your frame than you thought you did, and so you can take advantage of that and just kind of readjust as you go along. Now I get to chop out all these little bits of arm here. And then we'll make sure that his armpit doesn't look like it's growing a new leg or something. There we go. And make sure everything, proper layers in place. It's not. Well, it's pretty deep up there. Interesting. I might just delete that guy. Oops. Let's see. Object. Ungroup. Sometimes you just build these things and over time they sort of iteratively start compounding and piling up, and you've got so much redundant stuff going on that it's kind of difficult to figure out where it all is and where it all should be. Now he also looks a little too happy for a guy that's trying to explain to his daughter the realities of YouTube stardom. So again, he's going to be looking over at her. Just adjust his eyes, make him look over to the side of the frame. And we're going to change his mouth here a little bit because we don't want him to look too happy. And she looks a little indifferent to the whole thing. So yeah, this is really what the bulk of this comic making is trying to tweak and fiddle so that these models start to have an original sort of look to them, so that each one, even though it's built off the same original starting point, that they all sort of have their own bit of personality that goes into them. And that, I think, is the trickiest part of the whole thing. So here we are, 2 frames. Now, I'm going to zoom in here, and I will duplicate some more text here. Get another text box. And now she's going to go, well, maybe if we give away a prize. For some reason it doesn't want to copy into this. Maybe if we had a prize. And the dad says, apparently nothing, because it doesn't want to copy. Oh. Don't you hate it when you're making a video? And let's just simplify this. Maybe if we give a prize. No. I'm not spending money to advertise videos of us playing video games. You know, I understand that this could be a cash cow if you wanted to cash in on it, but you know, he's not that savvy. Now, how can I simplify this? Maybe if we had a prize. No, I'm not spending money to advertise videos of us playing video games. Yeah, that seems like it's simple enough. Now, all right. Let's just get the rest of this text and then we'll sort it out. Now, the key to these comics, now that you've watched me kind of fuddle through making one of these things, is really this kid sort of, you know, one of those say the darndest thing sort of thing. I'm sure that's copyright or something, but whatever. Kids say weird things. So we've got this kid who is sort of like got this level-headed practicality, but you know, a little bit of naivety that goes on with it. Dad, I need to get famous soon, or I'll just be another boring grown-up. The implication being is that she sees this as her path to fame, and he's sort of like, yeah, you don't need to be famous. He says, I think I'll risk it. We're getting close. Getting very close. Just add some emphasis to some of this stuff, and then we'll fix up their faces. If I was hand lettering this stuff, it would be a case of trying to find the right text size to sort of give the emphasis, because there's two ways you can do that, obviously. You can make the text bigger, or you can underline it and bold it and make it stand out. And these are not big, exciting conversations. They're just sort of a father and daughter sort of, you know, having a chat. So I tend to err on the side of not really blowing out the character's emotions. And I don't know, maybe that's the wrong tack to take, but I think it works for me. So get rid of those facial expressions. He's kind of rolling his eyes in that one. This one he's staring deadpan straight ahead because, you know, yeah, I'm not going to spend money to do that. It's a little bit more appropriate there. Let's have a look. A little bit of white in his mouth. Does look like he's smiling though, that's the problem. Let's give him a little bit of a downward curve on that mouth. Whoa! Simplify that up a little bit. Shorten it a little bit. This mouth doesn't tend to be that long. And we need to fix up the white space behind those things. Straighten that mouth up a little bit, clean it all up a little bit. He's got that stunned dad look on him. And he's sort of got the talking out of his side of his mouth and got that look on him like he's sort of like, yeah, whatever. You keep dreaming there, kid. 'Cause you know what he's thinking. He is thinking, what kind of wacko kid did I raise who wants to be famous? And of course, you know, I know kids aren't like this, but it is a comic, right? The whole point of it is that it's supposed to be funny. It's supposed to exaggerate the things all these kids say. And, you know, she's never actually said that, but, you know, under the current tone of what she says to me sometimes, it's like, that's what she means, you know? That's the sense I get. So there we go. Let's have a look at this thing. And, you know what? This is, I'm calling my first draft. Because this comic, it's early October and it won't come out till early November. So basically I'm taking this as a first stab. So if you're looking at this going, oh, you could tweak that or tweak that, you know, you're right. You're right, and I probably will. I'll come back in a week or so and play around with some of the expressions, play around with some of the art a little bit, just to kind of tune it up a little bit, clean things up, make sure I didn't miss anything. But in the meantime, I'm going to call that draft 1, and I'm going to save it. One last thing to do is to put a background layer on this. So it looks like I just deleted the whole thing, but I did not. I just made it so it's not having a transparent background. And then I spit this out as a PNG. And I'll just save it on my Dropbox for now. I know you can't see this part of it. You probably don't care about my Dropbox file structure. But I'm going to save this as Pi Day number 27. And I export these things rather huge sometimes, but that's how it's meant to be. Exporting it. It is saved. I'm just going to file save that. And just to show you, I now have in my renders, I've got a whole bowl full of renders here. Pi Day number 27. Oops. Let's open that up in our photo app. And there we go. We have a comic. Oops. Haha. Sneak peek. Haha. Can't see that one. That one's coming out soon. So, oops. Yeah. Scrolling around. So, yeah. So that one will get published probably early November. And, yeah, that is essentially how I make a comic. Hope you enjoyed that. Comments are welcome. Unless, of course, you're going to tell me how terrible I am, because I already know that. Don't need it re-emphasized. But I hope you're enjoying the comic. Check it out, piday.ca, and let me know what you think. Subscribe. Follow my comic. Follow me on Instagram at pidaywebcomic. I'm also on Facebook. I'm also on Twitter. Probably on some other ones that I don't really update. But, yeah. Hope you learned something. See you next time.